Listen, this is a big day in the NFL. And a lot of people may be like, what are you talking about, Rich? It's because rules are being changed. The way that the game is going to be officiated or reviewed is being voted on today. So the number of times that fans might get confused or go, when did that happen? Well, today, this day, okay? And so we're here on this show to make your life more understandable, and kind enough to join us once again on the Rich Eisen Show. He's on just last Thursday, back again now from the NFL owners meeting, membership, voting on rules changes. NFL Network insider Tom Pelissero back here now from Florida. Good to see you, Tom. How are you, sir?
Doing well, Rich. I think I nailed the backdrop. What do you think after the hasty running around here trying to find something relatively at eye level?
Looking good.
Only the best for you and the fellas in the studio.
It does look good. It does look
AI,
good.
Tom. It looks AI.
Tom, you look great.
Glad you found some shade during the commercial break. I was concerned about your SPF intake, but I'm glad you're good. Good to see you. Okay, so let's just jump into it here, Tom. What has been made a new rule in the NFL today that you think will be most game-changing this fall?
Well, if you look at the responses by players on social media, it's pretty apparent that the hip drop tackle has struck a nerve, particularly with defensive players. And they ran about a minute-long video of various examples of plays. The one that injured Tony Pollard, that was among the plays, was on that tape that people are probably going to remember. The one that Ryan Tannehill suffered one of his high ankle sprains on. There's a specific type of technique they're trying to get out of the game, and Rich McKay keeps saying it's not all hip drop tackles. There's the specific swivel hip drop tackle where you grab, you turn to the side, and then you, what they say is unweight into the back of somebody's legs or ankles, and that has a high injury rate. There was one hit on Geno Smith that people might remember from a game last season as well. It's a technique that the NFL, over objections from the NFL Players Association and over some skepticism that I've even heard here from some head coaches about how exactly you teach this technique, was going to ramrod this through. When Roger Goodell and Troy Vincent go up to the podium as far back as December and say, this is a play we want to get out of the game, you can rest assured they're going to get that out of the game. You've still got debate going on about the kickoff play. We could get a vote. I know they're back in session this afternoon. I think it's around 2 p.m. Eastern time. And then again tomorrow could be a vote on that potentially tomorrow. A lot of times if it's a rules vote that happens on a Tuesday, it means they realize maybe they don't quite have the votes yet. And so you might need to do some vote whipping at the annual reception that takes place tonight out on the lawn here. There was one other that popped up besides, the Lions had a proposal about you get a third challenge even if you only get one right. That went through. The Rich McKay said something really interesting while explaining the hip drop tackle and also explaining the way that he was asked the question whether or not that would be potentially reviewable. And he just kind of in passing mentioned that they're also going to apply replay assist, meaning where the replay assistant, without a challenge, even if it's not inside of 2 minutes, can stop a play or can say, hey, in the official's ears, hey, we got that wrong. You got to move the ball back or the clock ran, whatever it might be. And he said, yeah, there's a handful of times a year where roughing the passer, where, we think the guy's hitting the head and he wasn't, so that's something we can use it for. I went up to Rich after the press conference and said, wait, are you saying this season replay assists now can correct roughing the passer? And the answer was yes, albeit in specific instances, because what they want to lean on is where you have clear and objective evidence. They have always, the competition committee of the league, have long been reluctant to make other fouls, anything that is subjective, reviewable. Because what are you doing? You're replacing one person's judgment, the person on the field, with the judgment of somebody else who's not on the field. So this needs to be as clear and obvious as the guy stepped out of bounds or the ball was loose, things that on tape they can see. But now, if it's flagged as, hey, the quarterback got hit in the head and you see on replay he missed and he hit him here, the replay assistant now can fix that. They also can fix intentional grounding calls if, in fact, the quarterback was inside or outside the pocket, whether or not they were inside or outside the pocket. They also can look at that. That might seem like a small thing, Rich.
Oh, it's not.
But in a league where you take baby steps all the time toward these types of things, the fact that next year you could have a flag for roughing the passer picked up by the replay official, I don't know if that's a step towards something much broader, a sky judge or whatever. But that is something significant that even if it's a small number of plays next season, could make a big difference.
Well, I mean, again, it does matter how it is presented, how it is officiated, and the way you just said is replay assist can pick up a flag. It's entirely possible a flag for passer, roughing the passer is thrown. The replay is shown. The refs are still huddling up and then come out of the huddle because replay assist gets in their ears and say, no, we just took a look at it, pick the flag up. And they'll just say, there's no flag on the play. There is no penalty for roughing the passer. And then we move on. That's a different thing than just roughing the passer. They mark off the yardage. Hold on a second. We're going to now go under the hood and take a look. That's a different ball of wax. And I don't believe it'll be done that way, Tom.
Replay assist is what happens. They can go all the way up till I believe it's 20 seconds left on the play clock.
Yes.
Where if there's something that's obvious, this guy stepped out 10 yards back, they're able to correct that. What they're now able to do is that flag is thrown for roughing the passer and the stadium's booing and the officials are huddling up. The replay assistant can look at that, can communicate with the official on the field. Did you see him get hit in the head? Okay, he didn't actually get hit in the head. Pick up the flag. There's long been suspicions, obviously, that whether it's 345 Park or the replay booth or some combination of them might weigh in occasionally on things that aren't on the books. This is, as far as I'm aware, the first time that on fouls like roughing the passer or intentional grounding, the league is flat out saying now we want the replay assistant to do it if they've got that clear, objective evidence. It's not subjective. It's not, well, he didn't really drop his weight on him. No, it's got to be something as clear as there was not the type of contact that the officials thought that they saw. Pick up the flag, and we move on.
Love it. And next step for that would be do it for all 15-yard penalties, but, baby steps. Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. Explain best you can, because, again, I just said earlier on at the top of our program, you were kind enough to send out the document that included the latest revision on the kickoff rule to all of us in the NFL Media Group email chain, and I popped it open. It's 10 pages long. 10 pages. So can you do your best to describe to everybody what is on the table and how you think it might get voted on with the kickoff rule, Tom?
It's funny, Rich, because, when Rich McKay was talking about this, he basically prefaced everything in the press conference by saying, if you haven't seen this before, like if you watched XFL, which is a variation of it, if you haven't seen it before, it seems really complicated. If you haven't read the whole rule, it's really complicated. I've seen it and I've read the rule. It's still very complicated. The shortest way to put it out there, Rich, is you're going to have the kickoff. The actual ball and the kicker are still kicking from the same place on their side of the field. The difference is, rather than having the setup zone, the players on the kick return team and the kickoff team lining up on the minus side of the field, in other words, the side where the ball is kicking, well, the setup zone, it's on the plus side of the field toward the receiving team side of the 50-yard line. The receiving team's on the 35. Kickoff team is on the 40. What that does is that reduces the space and speed of the play. Because what special teams coordinators over the past several years have been charged with is come up with a rule that encourages returns, but also gives us a more palatable injury rate. Because this is another play where the league will always say there are much more injuries on kickoffs than any other play because you've got these extreme high-speed collisions. So basically, you're going to have the kickoff is going to go over the top of both the kickoff and the kick return teams. There's going to be a landing zone where the ball has to go. It either needs to land on the ground there or needs to be fielded there. If you kick it short, that's a penalty. If you kick it over the top of them into the end zone or you kick it through the end zone, that's a touchback. Rather than coming out to the 20 or the 25, this is the modification last night. It's now going to come out to the 30. They actually were going to have it come all the way out to the 35-yard line. But basically, the theory I'm making at the 30 instead was there's going to be times in the game where you just don't want to risk the big return. And so you need to have some slightly less punitive way to just kick the ball over everybody's heads and start the next possession here. You can expect, by virtue of the fact that the kickers are being legislated to put the ball in play, you're going to have more returns. The skepticism, and I talked to a lot of head coaches, Rich, over the weekend. We did a bunch of sit-down interviews for NFL Network and then just talking to people in the restaurants, maybe the bars at night, you know how these league meetings go. I've heard a lot of different, versions of the unintended consequences of this. Maybe the most intriguing of them was one coach who said you have basically like we're playing cover zero, but on a kickoff. If you have everybody lined up 5 yards apart and there's nobody behind, then if the kick returner penetrates that first line of defense, you're gone. We could end up having a ton of kick return touchdowns, and that play could end up being unevenly weighted in terms of its impact on the outcome of the game. So then we'd be going from a completely dead ceremonial play, as Troy Vincent put it back in December, to a play that you might have a kick return multiple times every Sunday. And I'm not even saying that that's a bad thing, but coaches are always wary of, de-weighting any particular part of the game or adding added weight to it here. It'll be interesting to see. That's all part of the discussion. That's why, unlike hip drop, which, like I said, was destined to be voted through no matter what, I'm taking a little bit more time. I would imagine there's going to be some further conversations. There could even be tweaks because, Rich, the other thing that this new kickoff rule, what they're calling the NFL hybrid kickoff, because, of course, they don't want to call it the XFL kickoff rule. One of the things that they did not change was the onside kicks. The onside kicks are going to look exactly like what they looked like over the past couple of years, which, based upon how rare it is for a recovery, you still don't really have the opportunity to recover a kick. Now, on top of it, you can't surprise anybody because you have to declare it because the formation is different. And the Eagles' 4th and 20 alternative to the onside kick got voted down for like the 8th year in a row.
Well,
so something's got to be done about the onside kick, but they're trying to change and fix the broader kickoff play first.
I do love the Eagles keeping on trying on that, but and as much as I'd love to see it, and we talk about it here all the time, that we'd love to see a 4th and 20 play. The issue is, though, that you can't is figuring out what if there's a defensive penalty. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that suddenly now it's a first down if it's just one hold play, one illegal contact play. Why wouldn't somebody just always pass, interfere with the receiver if there is no defensive penalty thrown, right? Or there's no threat of a defensive penalty if you do remove it to make sure that it's a 4th and 20. Like, there's no answer to it. I got Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. There's one other rule that did get passed that I'm wondering if you can explain to me. Allows for an enforcement of a major foul by the offense prior to a change of possession in a situation where there are fouls by both teams. Well, I've read that over and over and over again. I'm sure you've spoken about it with somebody that knows. What is that, Tom? What's the scoop there?
Put it this way, Rich. That one is so nuanced that Rich McKay in the press conference said, that's a Walt Anderson thing. I'm not even going to try to explain it.
Huh.
It has to do with whether something is an offsetting foul versus a foul that's then enforced post-possession. It's a complicated thing that doesn't come up all that much.
Okay.
People who have probably been watching the NFL don't even know why things were enforced one way to begin with. This just kind of simplifies things in terms of how they walk off various penalties.
I appreciate that. In the few minutes I have left with you here, whose table did you go up to today in the AFC? Because you can't cover the whole darn thing. There's 16 different coaches speaking at the same time. Just to give you, give everyone a glimpse on what you think the story is or was this morning. Who'd you speak to today?
Well, I think Mike Tomlin was one that was notable because it's the first time that he had talked since the acquisition of Russell Wilson, as well as the trade for Justin Fields. He left the tiniest bit of wiggle room in terms of what I've reported, what other people have reported, which is that Russell Wilson is the starter. But Tomlin said the words I use are pole position. He's in the pole position. Tomlin said, I think it's important to kind of, set your depth chart, people to know what their roles are going into the offseason. He said Justin is going to get the opportunity when it comes time for training camp to show his abilities, is what Tomlin said. So in essence, Fields is going to get reps, but this is not going to be a splitting the reps, alternating series type of a thing. Russell Wilson goes in as the starting quarterback, as I've reported. And then Justin Fields also is, of course, going to get opportunities. And you would think Arthur Smith is going to be dreaming up some things you might be able to do with him in the red zone. Jim Harbaugh, definitely worth seeing. I'm trying to remember back. It's been close to 10 years since he was an NFL coach, but it felt like he was really engaging and wanted everybody to come over and was enjoying answering questions. One of the best ones to him was, he was asked about Keenan Allen and, what was it like and why they decided to trade him. And he goes, $23 million a year living in Chicago? Who's got it better than Keenan Allen? And that was kind of how he answered the question. Okay, well, he got to get a lot of money that he wasn't going to make from the Chargers. He gets to go to another team. And, he seemed like he was pretty happy about that. He was also saying, over and over, maybe he's trying to will this into existence, but hey, there's rumblings that maybe the top four top 4 picks will all be quarterbacks, which of course would mean your guy J.J. McCarthy and his guy Rich would probably be the 4th one who's getting up there. Well, then Harbaugh said we basically have the number 1 pick because they're sitting there at number 5. That's going to be a fascinating story to watch how the top of this draft plays out. Sean Payton, the Broncos coach, said, he does think it's realistic that they could trade up. Obviously, they're not exactly rich with picks right now, but they're not completely depleted either, despite all that they gave up to get Sean Payton and, of course, Russell Wilson before him. So the Broncos are the one team that on paper, I think you have the least idea of what exactly they're going to do at quarterback come September, but you've still got some runway as we lead up to this thing. And then there were some other various updates around the room. Joe Burrow, it sounds like, making good progress, returning from his injury. Robert Saleh said Aaron Rodgers should be ready prior to the start of spring workouts, which makes sense since he was, if they'd made the playoffs, Rodgers was fully intending that he might be able to get out there and, try to do something in January coming off that ruptured Achilles tendon. So there's obviously a lot going on in that room. You're kind of, catching bits and pieces of various conversations, but it's a quarterback-driven league. And with some of the quarterback movement, Rich, that we have seen so far within the league, there's still a lot more to come just because there are a lot of good quarterbacks at the top of this draft, and there's a bunch of quarterback-needy teams all drafted in the top round 1.
Last one for you, Tom Pelissero. Friday night, one of the best defensive players in the league. We saw L'Jarius Sneed make so many plays for the Chiefs, including the one that knocked the ball loose out of Zay Flowers' hands in the AFC Championship game when the Ravens were trying to make it a one-score game. The Chiefs franchise tag him. Why did they trade him away? And why was the compensation a swap of 7th-round draft choices this year and a 3rd next year for one of the best defensive players in the NFL?
The price tag was high in terms of the contract, Rich. L'Jarius Sneed wanted to be the highest-paid cornerback in the NFL. We don't have the full details on that contract yet, but certainly he got a top-of-market type of deal. So it's a win for Tennessee to get a player like that. A lot of times the contract demands are going to impact the compensation. The way, though, that my understanding is the Chiefs looked at this was, they love L'Jarius Sneed as a player and a person. He's been a huge contributor for them, but they needed cap space. They immediately cleared that entire, I think it was about a $19 million tag. That's off the books. So now they've got more spending power right now to potentially do some different things. And yeah, they could have gotten a 3rd-round comp pick by having Sneed play this year on that tag and then losing him in free agency next year. But the thing is, it's not like you get an automatic pick. It's based upon your free agent gains and losses. So if the Chiefs then next offseason had a couple of needs and signed a couple of guys, they would never get that pick. So instead, you lock in what effectively would have been your 3rd-round comp pick in 2025. You get that right now. There's also, as you mentioned, that swap of 7s here. And you have additional cap space, which, listen, if anybody has earned the right to move on from marquee-type players for the betterment of the entire roster, it's Andy Reid and Brett Veach. Same thing a couple of years ago at this meeting. I remember talking to Veach about trading away Tyreek Hill at this point. The math was very similar, which was the contract number got to a certain point where they felt like, you know what, we can get picks for Tyreek Hill and we can clear all this money off the books. Well, where were they at 2 years later? They spent a lot of that money on the defense. They won a couple more Super Bowls here. It'll be interesting to see with a little extra pocket change here over the next month leading up to the draft. What potentially could they add in Kansas City?
Tom, you're the man. Thanks for making us smarter. Get on inside. Appreciate the time, and I look forward to seeing you down the road. Appreciate it, Tom.
Okay, Rich, you got it.
Tom's going to do the NFL Insider Show on NFL Plus, the top of this hour, 1 Eastern time. Check him out with Ian and the rest of the gang. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.